We officially heard from Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter. Joe Burrow finally posted. What are the Cincinnati Bengals going to do with Myles Murphy? We'll talk a little bit about the Texas A&M Aggie reunion now on the Cincinnati Bengals. All that and more on tonight's episode of Bengals Daily. It is tonight's episode. One more episode. My dank, dingy dungeon here in Zion National Park. The family's heading home tomorrow. I appreciate everyone's patience with me. We'll be back in the normal studio, my basement, um, tomorrow and onward as we get back to the normal routine. Plenty to catch up on this upcoming week. We'll get a quick one for you here as we prepare to travel home tomorrow. Here's your fun fact though for the night. Demetrius Knight Jr. told us that he is studying the tape of 4 linebackers this season to prepare for his second year in the NFL. 2 of them being Fred Warner and Roquan Smith. Those are pretty good guys to model your game after, if you ask me. The other 2, of course, Devin Lloyd, Leo Chenal, a couple free agents that the Bengals actually passed on or were unable to sign this past offseason. Would have been nice to be able to grab one of those 2 guys. We'll talk about Demetrius Knight, Barrett Carter, how they're approaching the offseason, Joe Burrow, Myles Murphy, and more on tonight's episode of Bengals Daily, part of the Fan Art Podcast Network. As always, my name is Dave Olson, and we're coming at you live. The undrafted free agent class is signed. The draft is over. We got to hear post-draft from Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter. That was pretty big. A quick update on Joe Burrow. We're going to quell some fears maybe around his availability, his desire about this offseason. Big conversation around Myles Murphy's 5th-year option. And we'll end up looking towards the reunition. No, that's not the word. The reuniting, there we go, of a couple previous college teammates here in Cincinnati. Let's talk about Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter first and foremost. You guys know me. I've been talking about these 2 linebackers. Demetrius Knight Jr. did take a big step in the back half of the season last year. I just saw more talent out of him. I mean, it truly was a second-round pick compared to a 4th-round pick, right? I mean, it just looked like a guy who was slightly more talented than his 4th-round counterpart. Barrett Carter also took a step, but has a lot more room to grow when you compare the 2 players. No linebackers drafted, passed on, or were unable to sign free agents. So no C.J. Allen, no Jacob Rodriguez, Leo Chenal, not in. Devin Lloyd, no. Free agency, draft, everything went by, and no linebackers brought in. If you told me at the beginning of the offseason that was the case, I would have been shocked. But the front office made it clear that they were addressing the linebacker situation through the defensive line and the secondary. We're going to build up around these 2 and hope that it gets better. Now, we also figured out that it was not the plan to not address linebacker. It just didn't work out, as frustrating as that might be for Bengals fans. The hope, though, is that the rest gets built up around these guys to the point where they can really improve their game. Barrett Carter spoke to reporters just a couple of days ago at the time of recording and said, and I quote, "It definitely speaks volumes that they trust us and that they're trying to see the vision with us. I'm happy about that, but we're confident they brought in 10 linebackers. We're confident if they didn't bring in a linebacker, we're just ready to keep going to work and keep building this foundation so that we're playing next February." Playing next February, of course, meaning the Super Bowl. So that's a second-year linebacker expressing some confidence in this team's ability to make the playoffs and make a run. I don't look too far into that. Every player of every team at any point in the year is going to say that they have a team that's good enough to make a run, and so I'm glad to hear the confidence, but I need to see it on the field. Talk is cheap, in my opinion. It's clear, though, that this is not a player that feels threatened, right? And that's one thing that concerns me as we've talked about linebacker. I want his position. I want Barrett Carter's position on this football team, not on the team. I mean, he's clearly going to be on the team. I want his starting role to feel threatened. I don't want him to feel comfortable with his starting position. I'm glad to hear that he wants to work hard. I hope that there's some threat in his mind to his ability to start football games next year. If not, That would be disappointing in my mind. Here's what Demetrius Knight had to say. He took a different approach. He talked about some of the tape that he was studying. Fred Warner, as I mentioned, Roquan Smith, Devin Lloyd, Leo Chenal, a couple of the free agent linebackers that the Bengals were unable to bring into the building, though I would have loved that. He said, and I quote, "I want to be able to mold myself into a backer that they can put anywhere, a backer that they don't have to take off the field." And so he's clearly heard a lot of the criticism that's come his way. The knock on his past season was his coverage ability. In passing situations, he was awful. He missed a lot of tackles. And a couple of the guys that he listed were much better in those avenues. So clearly realizing he needs to improve his game in the middle of the field. Especially Fred Warner, Leo Chenal, those guys when it comes to coverage, running, chasing. I mean, it's great to model your game after them. Again, I hate to say it, talk is cheap. I mean, I don't want to be jaded, but talk is cheap, in my opinion. If I'm being honest, as a fan, I'm listening to this, I'm saying, great, but show me. I'm so happy to hear that these guys realized their first year wasn't good. It unfortunately for us, and unfortunately for them, right, because you're going to have a lot of me saying, great, show me, but they can't show me for another, 4 months. Right, so unfortunately for me and for fans, we won't know if they've actually improved for 4 months. Unfortunately for them, they can't prove to us that they've improved for 4 months. Talk about this a little bit. Both Knight and Carter ranked outside the top 75 qualified linebackers in run stuff rate, and neither ranked inside the top 40 tackle rate on run plays. Carter allowed 9.9 yards per target and a 115.8 quarterback rating in coverage. So Barrett Carter was essentially allowing a first down when targeted and one of the best quarterback ratings in the league targeted. That's not good. That's not good. His run defense was bad, and his coverage grade was about as bad as it gets for a linebacker. So I'm glad he realizes he needs to. The good news is, I'm going to end this segment on some optimism. The good news is rookie linebackers have that has shown to be a tough transition to the NFL. That is a position that is difficult to play on day one. And there is an improvement in year 2. And I have the utmost confidence that the team that the Bengals put on the field around the linebackers is better this year than it was last year. I think that's undeniable. Only time will tell if that actually improves the game of these two linebackers, and if these two linebackers somehow miraculously get better in the offseason compared to what we saw in year 1. They did have good games at the end of last season, but they haven't been able to do anything except weight train and maybe study some tape in the last few months before they get back into training camp. So I don't know if I'm expecting some miracle leap from the end of the season to training camp, but we'll see. Again, I want to end on a positive note. I mean, they can't be worse, right? You hope they can't be worse. I think Barrett Carter should take a big step. I think Demetrius Knight should take a big step. Barrett Carter has a wonderful attitude. The positive side of me says that he's got a great attitude about this. Really wants to improve. Really wants to be better. And that's the mindset you have to improve in this league. I wish the Bengals would have done more. I'm still not ruling out them doing more. But I need to see it on the field. The good news is I don't think linebacker is what's going to sink this defense this year because you've got so much talent elsewhere. But I hope that they show this improvement that they've been taught. If nothing else, we've got 2 really likable linebackers who clearly show a desire to improve. So we heard from them this week. We also heard from Joe Burrow. We'll keep this one quick. I know we talked a little bit this week about Burrow. How dialed in is he? Hasn't been texting our free agent signings, hasn't been around the team. He's been out in LA. Have his priorities shifted? Well, of course, he's a young star quarterback. I'll post this week where he was with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. Was he with Chase? He was with Gesicki. Anyways, with the receivers, they all went out, trained with Burrow. Clearly, they're all getting together and working on being better at the game together. He's throwing, he's engaged, he's playing football, he's dialed in, he's playing with his teammates. Um, I don't think we were super worried about this, but I think the Bengals fans out there are just they're happy to see that the guys are together, they're playing football, they're going through a workout together, and their eyes are starting to turn towards next season. Remotivated after what the front office has done. He's healthy, watching, he's not disengaged, um, he's in shape, um, and so now he's probably just considering whether or not a restructure is going to happen. The Bengals might need to in order to free up some cash if there is going to be another move made in this offseason. The cap space is essentially tapped out. If they're going to do anything else significant, even minorly significant, it'll probably require a Joe Burrow restructure. Um, Good news is Burrow's dialed in. He's been working out with the team. Not the team. He's been working out with his receivers. He's happy. He's healthy. He'll show up ready to play. We can all take a deep breath and not worry about it. Let's talk about this one really quickly. Myles Murphy, there's been a big conversation, especially around the money, about whether or not the Bengals should pick up his fifth-year option. If the Bengals pick up that fifth-year option, it'll be about $17.5 million. So it's expensive. If they decline it, he'll be a free agent after the 2026 season. He would be under contract through 2027. Let me make that clear if they pick up his fifth-year option. May 1st, that's the deadline. So at the time of recording this, they've got a few more days. Murphy did just have his best season. We saw improvement over the last few years. Once he got some playing time, he became a much better player. That's great. I think he would be the starting edge rusher this year over Shamar Stewart. Be him and Boye Mafe. Of course, it seems like they're going to be rotating players in a lot. He had a great Myles Murphy had a great end to this last year. 24 years old. This is when the edge rushers typically make that big leap. So he's entering his prime, right? He had Cassius Howe into the mix. You're sort of wondering if you're going to pay him on a is this getting ahead of the curve, paying him pre-breakout? Is it better just to get an extension done with where he is now? Is he going to break out and you're going to owe him more money later? That's really what the Bengals are trying to decide now. So $17.5 million for developing edge rusher in his age 24 season. The rebuilt defensive line around him should, in theory, put up better numbers. So it seems like it could be a good idea, but that is a really expensive fifth-year option. However, Myles Murphy has also had some disappointing seasons. Bengals don't have much cap space remaining, if any, looking towards next year. $17.5 million is a ton of money. Has Myles Murphy proven that he's worth $17.5 million? Not yet, but could he prove that he's worth more next year? That's really the question. That's what the Bengals are going to have to decide. You're not going to lose him after this year. You're just going to have to negotiate again, depending on what he produces. So the Bengals have to choose, do we think he's going to produce at a high enough level that's going to warrant him asking for more than $17.5 million at the end of this season, or we lose him? Or do we just go ahead and knock out the $17.5 million, but maybe he underproduces? Really tough decision to follow. But the Bengals are probably thinking about this. They committed a ton of money to Lawrence. Adding $17.5 million on top of that for Murphy is a ton. But potentially losing Myles Murphy after 26 is also pretty painful. Seems to be an important piece in this defense. I would think the Bengals would pick it up. Banking on him taking another step forward, and then after 27 start to negotiate an extension. But I worry, based on what I've heard from the front office, that they're so worried about money and how tight money already is. They're going to have a lot of guys that they have to work out contracts for next year anyway. I could totally see a world where they don't pick up fifth-year option for Myles Murphy. That's certainly one to keep our eyes on, especially in the next couple of days as they have to make that decision. Um, Final topic here, and we'll get out of here before I have to travel home tomorrow from Zion National Park. Again, appreciate everyone sticking with me in my dank adobo dungeon here. One more day. Just a fun one for you. Cassius Howe and Shamar Stewart were teammates back at A&M back in 2024. Howe was actually behind Shamar Stewart. Stewart left for the NFL. Howe stayed, and Howe immediately broke out. These are two guys who played with one another. Shamar was, sort of a pressure machine. Howe ended up being a production machine when Shamar Stewart left. They know each other's game. This is not a super analytical piece. I just think it's kind of fun that you got two teammates who seemingly know how to play off of one another now back on the field. You would think that there's a chemistry building process to have these two in the building together that could get Cassius Howe up to speed and really actually look at it from the other angle. I think Shamar Stewart needs as much help as he can get. Can't believe I'm saying this. I actually have more hope Cassius Howe and the intangibles and the tangibles that I saw from him coming out of college, pure production monster, compared to Shamar Stewart. And I saw flashes in year one, and then he got injured. I think Shamar can lean on his old teammate here, getting into the NFL. And I think the two of them can work off of one another. I think Howell can come in with something to prove after playing behind Shamar. I think Shamar can show Cassius Howell the ropes a little bit here in Cincinnati. I think it's just sort of interesting now that we see the Bengals kind of turning their eyes towards the SEC edge rusher market. A&M. I don't think it's specifically that they love that school. I think they just happened to find a couple of guys from that system that at the time they really really enjoyed. I actually really liked the one final thing here. I liked what we heard from Cassius Howe when the talking about playing against the Chiefs, taking edge rushers before him, and now wanting to play against them, see him when we see him type thing. This is a guy who's going to come in and be a total mentality monster for the Bengals. And the Bengals need that on their defense. I saw no passion. I saw no fire from the defense last year, and they need someone who's going to get in there, fire the team up, and I think Cassius Howe can be that guy. The Bengals are now an LSU offense and an Aggie defense, I guess. We'll see. Lots of things to look forward to this week. We'll see what happens with Myles Murphy, his fifth-year option. We'll see if there's any movement in the linebacker market. And when I get home and I'm able to really break in some of these draft picks a little bit more and a couple of these undrafted free agents, we're going to dig into that analysis a little bit more. Just wanted to get a quick one out for you guys, talk a little bit about the Bengals before making my way home. Appreciate you guys, as always. My name's Dave Olson. This has been another episode of Bengals Daily, part of the Fan Arch Podcast Network.